What if Deckard Shaw is far from done in the Fast and Furious universe and Fast 11 is actually setting him up as something much bigger than just a supporting character? If you look closely, Shaw has slowly shifted from antagonist to controlled ally, and that kind of arc usually doesn't end quietly in this franchise. Many fans think Shaw will appear only briefly in Fast 11, but what if his role is more strategic than physical? Less street fights and more planning, intelligence, and behind-the-scenes manipulation. Shaw has always operated differently from Dom's crew. He doesn't fully trust them and they don't fully trust him, which makes him perfect for spin-offs where loyalty is constantly tested. There are strong hints that future spin-offs could focus on covert missions, global threats, or mercenary-style operations, and Shaw fits that tone perfectly if the franchise leans more into espionage than street racing. In Fast 11, Shaw's screen time might be limited but his influence could be massive. What if he is the one pulling strings, making deals, or protecting someone important off-screen, possibly even preparing a team of his own, a darker and more ruthless version of a family? What if Fast 11 only shows the beginning of that shift, using cryptic lines to make audiences question where his true allegiance lies? Shaw has never been fully redeemed, only tolerated, and that leaves the door wide open for betrayal, sacrifice, or a solo path that splits from Dom's world entirely. If the universe continues through spin-offs, Shaw could become the bridge between the old saga and a grounded tactical future. The real question isn't whether he will return, it's what version of Shaw comes back. The loyal ally, the lone wolf, or something far more dangerous? If Fast 11 ends without answering that, maybe that uncertainty is the point because Shaw's story might just be getting started. If Shaw really is being positioned for the future, then the silence around his character becomes even more suspicious because Fast and Furious has a habit of hiding its biggest twists in plain sight. What if Fast 11 intentionally underuses Shaw so audiences lower their expectations, only for a final reveal to change everything? Imagine Shaw watching events unfold from a distance, not intervening or helping Dom directly, but observing and calculating who survives. Shaw has always believed that information is more powerful than loyalty, and that mindset makes him dangerous in a universe built on trust. What if the next spin-off frames him as a necessary evil, someone the world turns to when Dom's way no longer works? Fast 11 could mark the end of street-level solutions and the beginning of something colder. Shaw has military discipline, global connections, and a willingness to cross lines the family never would. What if Shaw already knows something Dom doesn't about the true cost of winning this final war? Maybe his limited role is intentional because he is being saved for the aftermath, the world after Dom, where the rules are different and the stakes are global. Shaw represents the transition from chaos to control and from emotion to strategy. Fast 11 might end with the family celebrating, believing it is over, while Shaw walks away alone, already planning the next move. Some stories don't end with explosions, they end with silence, and sometimes the most dangerous character is the one who doesn't say goodbye. That silence could be the loudest clue of all because when Fast and Furious removes a character from the center, it usually means they are being repositioned. Shaw's absence in key moments isn't coincidence but choice, because he refuses to stand in Dom's shadow anymore. He survived villains and redemption arcs, and every time he has adapted, becoming harder to read. That evolution makes him perfect for a future that no longer relies on nostalgia but on unpredictability. Imagine a spin-off that opens with a global crisis Dom can't touch, something too political where the only name that comes up is Shaw. Not as a savior, but as a solution governments fear but still call when everything else fails. If that happens, Fast 11 becomes less of his ending and more of his origin story, the moment he fully steps away from the family label and embraces isolation. Shaw has always been strongest alone, and the final scenes of Fast 11 might reinforce that. Dom is surrounded by family and closure, while Shaw stands apart, watching, understanding that this world no longer needs him but another world does. One that operates in shadows and doesn't believe in happy endings. The franchise keeps him vague because Shaw represents the darker path Fast and Furious could take next. If audiences are ready for that shift, Shaw is already waiting. The real twist is this: Shaw isn't being set up as the next lead, but as the final constant. The one character who survives every era of the franchise, changing and adapting. Fast 11 doesn't answer where he is going because the answer depends on which direction the universe chooses to go next. Guy. Clipchamp. And the longer you think about it, the clearer it becomes that Shaw's future was never meant to be loud or obvious, because Fast and Furious has always used spectacle to distract from setup and explosions to hide intention. Fast 11 might be doing exactly that. While everyone is focused on Dom's final stand, Shaw's real story could be unfolding in the margins through short scenes and quick exchanges with looks that last a second too long. Shaw doesn't need monologues anymore, his presence alone suggests history, regret, and unfinished business. And what if one of his scenes in Fast 11 involves him refusing a direct call from Dom? Not out of anger, but out of understanding, because Shaw knows that helping this time would trap him in a story that is ending, and Shaw doesn't end, he moves on. That choice could quietly redefine him, no longer the antagonist who became an ally, but the man who chose not to belong, setting him apart from every other character in the franchise. That separation is exactly what spin-offs thrive on, because a character without a home can go anywhere and cross. What if future spin-offs show Shaw operating in regions and conflicts the main films never touch, dealing with consequences instead of victories where survival matters more than family? Fast 11 only plants the seed through a conversation hinting at contacts, a file marked classified, or a destination never explained, and the audience doesn't realize it is important until much later. The franchise loves retroactive meaning in moments that seem small until they are not, and Shaw's reduced presence could actually make him more powerful, turning him into a myth within the universe. He becomes someone spoken about more than seen, someone whose actions happen off-screen but reshape the world. If Fast 11 truly is the end of an era, then Shaw might represent what comes after endings, the characters who don't get closure, who don't sit at the table, and who don't drive off into the sunset. Not everyone survives a saga by winning, some survive by leaving, and if the final act of Fast 11 shows Shaw disappearing into the background with no farewell and no explanation, just absence, that absence might be the loudest promise of all. It is a promise that while Dom's story may close, Shaw's remains unresolved, waiting for the moment the Fast universe needs him again, not as family or a hero, but as something far more unpredictable. And that unresolved feeling might be exactly how Fast 11 wants to leave us, because endings in this franchise are rarely about answers and more about legacies. Shaw's legacy has never been simple. He entered the saga as a force of destruction, became an uneasy ally, and now exists in a space that no other character occupies. What if the final moments of Fast 11 subtly underline that difference, not with action, but with choice? Shaw choosing not to stay, not to celebrate, and not to be remembered as part of the victory. Victories attract attention and attention attracts consequences, and Shaw has learned that survival means stepping away before the cost is revealed. Maybe that is why his future cannot be clearly defined, because the Fast universe itself doesn't know what it will become next, whether it is street racing, global warfare, or espionage. Shaw is flexible enough to exist in all of those worlds, which makes him invaluable, not just to the characters, but to the franchise. If Fast 11 truly closes Dom's chapter, then Shaw becomes a living reminder that the world keeps moving, threats keep evolving, and some battles don't have families cheering at the finish line. Maybe the final image we are meant to remember isn't Dom driving off, but Shaw disappearing into a crowd, into a plane, or into the dark, with no confirmation of where he is headed or who he is working for. Uncertainty is power, and Shaw understands that better than anyone. The most dangerous characters aren't the ones who demand the spotlight, but the ones who can step out of it at will. If the Fast franchise continues through spin-offs, reboots, or unexpected directions, Shaw's shadow could be felt long before he ever returns on screen. Maybe that is the real theory, that Shaw isn't being set up for a clear role in Fast 11 or beyond, but for something much more unsettling. A presence that exists between stories and between eras, waiting, adapting, and watching. Because some characters don't get endings, they become possibilities. Fast 11 might close its doors with the understanding that while one saga ends, another quietly prepares to begin somewhere we are not meant to see yet.